Welcome to yet another episode of the Sports Lounge. In a week where football took an international break on the men's end and the UEFA Women's Champions League, it's in its quarterfinals, we decided to focus on Formula One shortly after the Australian Grand Prix. And I'm not the Formula One god, Treasure is still on break, but every Hamilton has his Verstappen, and today I'm flanked by Schumacher and Ayrton Senna. May God rest his soul. Shortly after the Australian Grand Prix, we have the season taking shape. Some OG constructors are already falling behind, and we have a few surprises on the grid already. But before we dive into that, let's get to meet our guests. Dowd, nice to meet you. It's finally good to have you on the show. Just introduce yourself to our fans. Just briefly.
Well, my name is Dowd. I'm a roadside Formula One analyst or fan, and I like Hamilton. I like Mercedes. I also like Ferrari more. So.
You've given us an idea of where your loyalties lie, but how did you get into Formula One?
I would say I did not know about the existence of Formula One till maybe 2009 or 2008, and that was like literally because Hamilton won his first championship then, and I just had this peripheral knowledge of Formula One until maybe 2015, 2016, where there was this radio show I used to listen to, sportsmen, Lagos Talks, and once in a while they'll have a Formula One expert or so, or Formula One enthusiast come on the show and just talk about the races, and so I was always just hearing Hamilton wins, Rosberg. I was like, okay, Hamilton is doing good, and that just got me curious and made me get into the sport.
Has the sport affected like any other aspects of your life? Like, do you speed real life now?
I don't have the money to fix it, to keep fixing my car.
No, but you could have been the next Hamilton.
I do have the fantasy all the time, especially when you're driving, and in my head I just think there's Formula One, but we might as well just create like a Formula 9 to 5 where it's like it's just regular people doing 9 to 5. So it's just like, okay, this morning we're all working in Lekki. So that's just how I race from your house to Lekki. So in my head, every other person in my front is like
it's competition.
It's competition. So, but at the same time, you try not to overdo things because
drive safely, guys. Drive safely. That's the most important thing. Turning over to. I don't want to address you by a surname yet. We'll keep that as a surprise.
No, just go ahead, man. It's all good. It's gonna come out eventually.
Turning over to another special guest here, we have Roberto Corona. Not the infectious one, or should I say infectious in many other ways, or like he prefers to call himself, Carlos Sainz. It's nice to have you on the show, man. It's been a while coming.
It's good to be here. So,
how did you? I see you're decked out in your Ferrari Formula One merch. Like, there's no need to ask any questions. You're La Ferrari.
I am indeed.
How did you get into Formula One?
I got into it watching it with my dad when I was a kid, and my dad's a very patriotic, old-school Italian guy. So, like, he's the type of guy that'll start watching tennis because there's an Italian guy on it. Tennis is boring, in my opinion. But if there's an Italian guy there, that's what we're watching still. So, Schumacher, that was my childhood and all that. I fell out of love with Formula One when Hamilton was winning over and over again. I'm still a Hamilton fan, don't get me wrong. But when they started getting a little bit competitive again, that's when I jumped into the thing again still. So, yeah, that's...
Still a Hamilton fan, but Ferrari comes first. Like, I'm guessing that's why he fell out of love.
Yeah, it's, the sport becomes boring for me when you're seeing the same guy win over and over and over and over again, do you know what I mean? Same as what's kind of happening now, but man, it's Ferrari till I die still.
Okay, same as what's happening now, but it seems like this season is giving us like a bit of a shake-up. For the last season we had Red Bull simply bullying the grid.
Yeah.
But we're 3 races in and Ferrari is, I think, just 4 points short in constructor point.
They are, but you got to keep in mind we're early into the season.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And 2 years ago, Verstappen had the same outage that he did in Australia, and then he came back and he dominated everything. He bullied everyone. So I'm not. I don't want to say I'm not getting too excited, or I don't want to overhype myself about it or anything like that. I've got hopes for Ferrari. They're a bit more competitive, seemingly so after 3 races. But Red Bull is still a force to be reckoned with. So I'm holding my breath still.
Okay, but do you think, like, this is me putting you on the spot, do you think Ferrari can sort of hold a torch to Red Bull this season?
They can hold a candle. Max Verstappen. Not a torch, no. The candle's going to run out eventually, and that's what I think is going to happen with Ferrari, because that's what they've been doing over the last couple of years. Whenever they give us a little bit of hope, something happens and it is what it is. But Red Bull is a machine. It's well oiled. They know what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? So we have to give them the respect, because they're champions for a reason.
Yeah.
I would love a situation where I see this colour on the podium, 1 and 2 every weekend. But realistically, I need to manage my own expectations, or my blood pressure is going to go through the roof.
Yeah. I definitely understand that. You said something that Red Bull are a well-oiled machine and they seem to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Let's switch over to a constructor who seems to not know what they're doing. Now, like, what's up with Mercedes? Like, what's up with Mercedes this season? Like,
I feel like I have to come to their defense a little bit. No one is more frustrated with them than I am. But
yeah, I mean, you're Hamilton and Mercedes through and through right now.
I mean, that yes, certainly it's their fault that they're in this position that they are now. But
Yeah.
sometimes I just try to put things into context a little. They changed their concept for this year, so they binned the zero pod concept that they've gone with for the past 2 seasons. And from the get-go, they've been telling us that there's going to be a learning curve. While teams like Red Bull, Ferrari, they've been building, progressively over the last 2-3 years. They are essentially going back to the drawing board. And yeah, so there was the hope that yes, by testing and by the first race, it will just be like, oh, Mercedes have done this amazing, unbelievable job, like what we saw Aston Martin did last year, in the early races last year. But I understand that they have to keep learning, experimenting, trying to figure out the car. But at the same time, it is just so frustrating, because teams with similar resources that they have are doing much better jobs. Ferrari seems to have gotten over some of their issues that they had last year, tire wear, some of their strategy errors. But Mercedes they seem to be going nowhere, to be honest.
Do you think they'll sort it out, like, say, halfway into the season or before the season ends? Or are you already writing off Mercedes for this season?
Well, before the season started, my expectation, I was just, the least expectation I had, or let's say the maximum I was hoping to get out of this season was at least one Hamilton win. Like that was all it would have taken for me to just be fully satisfied with this season.
Okay.
But the first 3 races I've just, I do not see, honestly, I do not see any light at the end of the tunnel. I see maybe a couple of races where, we do well, but the gap at the top is so tight now. We have Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren now, Aston Martin, on some weekends. So it's so tight, and they just, for a team that has won 8 constructor titles, I mean, I know I'm not an engineer or anything like that, but it feels a little disappointing as a fan.
A little.
A little. See, the thing about Formula One is, compared to football, for example, for football, for 90 minutes, you have heart palpitations, because there's the hope, we are going to equalize, they might score more. But in Formula One, pretty much as soon as the cars get to turn 1, you already know, how the rest of the race is going to go and how the rest of your weekend is going to go.
Like, do you think Mercedes will, like, figure it out at some point this season, or
I think
are you writing them off?
I wouldn't write them off as a team. Maybe for this season, yeah. I wouldn't write them off, because they have a legacy that, they were the best team in the world for 8 seasons.
Yeah.
I think one thing to look at with Mercedes is potentially maybe the chemistry that's in the team right now with the engineers, Toto and the drivers and everything. Lewis Hamilton is clearly fed up with the team. There's no doubt about it. That's what made him what he is right now. I mean, aside from his obvious talent and all that, I'm not going to write them off. I think they're going to come back eventually, but they need a change up. The same way that Lewis needs a new team. Now, I don't necessarily think Ferrari might solve the problem for him. I think him as a sportsman, he probably needs a situation where he needs to be out of the sport for 12 months just to regather his thoughts, because he went from best in the world to now he's struggling.
Yeah.
George Russell has been more competitive than him in most of the races.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Let me just cut you short there. With Hamilton leaving Mercedes, do you guys think? I'll start with doubt here. Do you think Russell can be the face of Mercedes, or do you think there's another driver coming to, well, sort of be the face and Russell plays deputy once again?
If we are considering drivers that are on the grid at the moment, I think even after Australia, Toto still said his first choice will be Verstappen, which I don't know what kind of magic he wants to perform to make that happen. But if we remove Verstappen out of the picture, I think Russell, is going to be the default face of the brand, but Russell doesn't have that aura to me. He seems like the kind of person that the brand will shape. He seems very corporate in that sense, and it doesn't seem like he has the personality to define, the brand image of Mercedes in the same way that Hamilton has.
How about you? Do you think Russell can be the face of Mercedes and like sort of rep them as well as Hamilton has done?
Nobody's going to replace Hamilton in that team, not for a number of years to come. But I do think George Russell has the potential to be number one driver for Mercedes. And we've seen some of his performances before, where he gets faster slap at the end. One thing that we need to remember about Formula One, and a lot of the drivers that are on that grid that are doing very well now, they haven't just jumped in the car and started doing very well straight away. Max Verstappen joined the sport when he was 17. And the last 3 years he's been dominating. This is very much a sport where people mature with their teams and their cars and everything. And I think Russell has shown good initiative for the fact that he's been with the team for the amount of time that he has been. I think given some opportunity, right now he probably has a big shadow over his head in that I need to follow in the footsteps of Lewis Hamilton. And that's not an easy shadow to follow. You can't just... You're not going to wake up on...
huge footsteps.
They're huge. You're not going to wake up one day and be Lewis. It depends on who is going to replace Lewis the next year, but I do think the potential is there. I think for Mercedes right now, their atmosphere is probably a little bit toxic. Everybody's frustrated because they went from up here and now they're right here. I mean, if Aston Martin is being competitive with you when you've won all sorts, then,
Slight dig at Aston there.
No, not really. They've done well, but you know what I mean? Like
They're not on the level that Mercedes is, definitely.
Do you feel it's the perceived shadow of Hamilton that makes Russell seem prone to errors when he's under a lot of pressure, or it's just a skill issue?
I think the errors that Russell has, those aren't about his shadow. Those are about his own skill and his own level of maturity when it comes to the sport. But even when he gets more refined as a driver, you are still following big footsteps there with Lewis Hamilton.
So
you know what I mean?
the pressure is always there.
The pressure is always going to be there. He got interviewed and they asked him, what do you feel about who Lewis's replacement is going to be? And he was respectful. He said, I'll be happy to have anybody, because having him as a teammate is a great honor and he's a great driver to work with. But his own mistakes, he'll have to get over that himself. Do you know what I mean? Irrespective of who replaces his teammate and all that. But yeah, that Lewis shadow, that's always going to be there until he can prove otherwise.
Okay, let's talk about drivers 1 and 2, but for another constructor.
Okay.
You've shown a clear preference over time in conversations off screen for Carlos over Charles. Why?
I think Carlos is the more mature one of the two. I think he's more he could be more persistent when his car is working. And also, I've seen Carlos's defensive driving, and for me, when you're dogfighting in that sport, you know, when it's like 3 laps to the end or whatever, and you could stop a monster like Checo from overtaking you, or you can re-overtake him and all that. I mean, Charles has done it as well. But Carlos, I think he's better at keeping calm and carrying on with the job. Whereas I think Charles is a bit more emotional. And don't get me wrong, the sport is emotional in itself.
But you don't think he keeps his head as cool as Carlos does?
No, I don't think he does, no. I don't think he does.
Sorry, let me get his thoughts on that. Carlos or Charles?
Okay. So,
I don't usually shit on the fence. Carlos or Charles? Pick one.
well, Charles. So yes, I agree. Carlos might seem the more consistent driver in the sense that, it seems he's more methodical. He has a larger picture of what goes on during the race than Charles does. Charles just seems to focus on driving the car fast. But something I've seen that most Formula One teams place a lot of priority on is, what is the highest peak a driver can get to. And Charles has shown that he can get to much higher peaks than Carlos has. And I think because Ferrari, they've not exactly, except for 2022, they've not had like the World Championship, contending car. And so I think keeping that in mind, there's a lot of leeway and a lot of tolerance for, Charles' inconsistencies, so to speak.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I think, again, like we say with Russell, there's the potential there, and the hope is that when the car is ready, they're also ready to, to fight for the championship. So, I'll say Charles because, just thinking about higher peak.
So Carlos, like from what you guys have said, Carlos will definitely take you farther over the course of the season. But if you're looking for that one lap, that one race, it's Charles.
Even at that, no, I think I like, and this is the interesting thing about this conversation because Dawood he's made a good point there. But I think maybe Dawood has a better way of looking at Ferrari as a team because that's not the team that he supports.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to be biased to Sainz because I'm wearing his number. or
That's fine. Like I like a man who can admit the possibility of bias.
Yeah. There could be that. I mean, Charles has impressed me in the past. But for me, it's from what I've seen, he has a tendency to brick it under pressure. I think it was a couple of years ago, it was either Nürburgring or somewhere else. He was chasing one of the Red Bull cars and he spun the car out because he overcooked
He did that in Paul Ricard in...
wasn't it? Yeah.
it was Paul
And he
Ricard.
spun the car and then he ended up 8th or something like that. And I was really irritated by that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Sorry. You mentioned it's been a while since Ferrari had a World Championship car. Do you think they can push Red Bull this season? I mean, it's just 3 races in, but this is as close to anyone has gotten to Red Bull in the last year.
Yeah, Red Bull is one thing, to be honest, but Max Verstappen is another. I do not, in the hands of Checo, yeah, definitely, but in the hands of Max, I think the only opportunity anyone else has to win a race is if something like what happened in Australia, happens again. Or maybe there's a track like Singapore last year where the car was just not suited to the track. I think it's only when Verstappen is on it and Ferrari, McLaren, nobody has a chance, to be honest.
So, like, is that the perfect, should I say perfect marriage? A monster driver meeting a monster car. Verstappen in a Red Bull right now.
It probably is to a degree. And I agree with everything that Dude said because, honestly, like obviously Ferrari won last weekend in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And I was happy to see a Ferrari 1-2, but to me it didn't feel organic. Simply because I didn't see Max Verstappen on the grid, he DNF'd.
Yeah.
Any Red Bull fan will probably turn around and say, if he was driving, he would have won the race. And I'm inclined to agree. But yeah, it's taken them a long time to get to where they are now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they've got the perfect synergy. They've got the best team, best engineers.
That's right.
Verstappen knows how to drive his car, because even if we argue that someone is more competitive than him, if they get in his car with the settings that he has it on, they're not going to be able to handle the car the way that he does. So yeah, it's the perfect monster, the perfect machine, the perfect driver. Max Verstappen might as well be AI. He's an algorithm. Do you know what I mean? He just doesn't get it wrong.
Max Verstappen, you received your flowers. I mean, what more praise can you give to a Formula One driver?
I'm a Ferrari fan, but you know, one thing we have to do is we have to appreciate when someone is doing the job very properly.
Last time I heard someone get this like sort of adulation, it was Hamilton, but that was like years ago. I think was it the W12? Hamilton and his W12. Well, we'll see. So that's about it for our regular section. But we'll be bringing to you shortly after this break. We'll be doing a special session courtesy of our partners Johnny Rockets and Kubo Bid. I'll be bringing them on the hot seat. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now it's the hot seats segment of the Sports Lounge, brought to you by our partners Johnny Rockets, the home of the best burgers in Lagos, Nigeria, and Kubo Bid, the #1 fantasy auction website in the country. So I'll be putting both our gentlemen on the hot seat, asking them quick fire questions, and let's see how well they can perform. Who wants to go first? Let's go science.
Right.
So the first question: what if you've watched? Do you follow the Marvel universe? Not really. Okay, so in the history of Formula One, if you could alter one thing that would create an alternate Formula One universe, different from what we have right now, what would you alter?
I would not allow second teams. So like Red Bull having Toro Rosso and all them, I would cut that out. I'd sooner see Honda or Toyota or another manufacturer have that space.
So like that's one decision you change.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think it will affect the sport?
I think there's other manufacturers out there or dedicated racing companies out there that would have more of an impact on the sport than Red Bull having Red Bull Junior, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Fair enough. Could you give us insights to say one or two?
I'd like to see Lotus Audi's joining the sport in 2026. Give people time to do their research and actually come in with maybe some drivers from Formula 2 or something like that, and actually be able to score points and make it more competitive.
Okay.
Because right now, it's same 3 or 4 teams that are in the top 4.
Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Aston.
Not Mercedes, really, to be fair.
Aston.
Aston's only been there like for a couple of months. Do you know what I mean? Lance Stroll's going to fuck it up somehow. But
You already have your Alpha Stroll. Actually, now what would be a what if change? What change would you make?
Does it only have to be, from a team perspective? Or
Anything at all. Anything at all. If you could stop Senna's accident from happening, that could be it.
Yeah. No, it's not. I would say Latifi. Well, if I want to be harsh, I'll say that he should not have been. Let me say he should not have been born, but he should not have made it into Formula One in the first place.
Latifi.
Yes,
that's a good point.
How drastic do you think that change could have been?
Well, Hamilton would have his hits by now, so yeah.
I see. Okay, so you're basically tilting the sport in favor of Hamilton.
Oh yes.
That's fair. So meaning if you could make another change, it would be the 2021 Abu Dhabi.
Well, I mean,
Because that could have been his 8th as well.
Yeah, it's literally because of 2021 Abu Dhabi. I'm saying that.
Okay, my bad. Then the second question on the hot seat. Let's take away Red Bull drivers and let's take away Ferrari drivers. Who would you love? Who are the 2 drivers you put in a Ferrari right now?
I would put Lando Norris and George Russell.
That was easy. So like,
I thought about it, bro. I would.
okay, and then for you, take away Red Bull's drivers, take away Mercedes drivers. Who would you put in the Mercedes right now?
Okay, this is difficult because mentally I'm in the transition process. So,
You're already switching to where?
well, I'm switching to the red team.
To Ferrari. Alright.
Yeah.
I said, alright. So, who would you put in the Mercedes?
Okay, I'll put Alonso. Yeah. And I will put in. Well, just because I like him and I think he's severely underrated, Hulkenberg.
That's a big shout.
Yeah.
Okay, Hulkenberg and Alonso in the Mercedes, Lando Norris and Russell in the Ferrari. Fair enough. And that's it from us on the Sports Lounge. Stay tuned. You guys seem to be keeping this slander for other episodes. So stay tuned for the next Formula One special. That's it from us at the Sports Lounge. Thank you for staying with us. Please like, subscribe, and follow us on all our social media. Home of TSL on Twitter, Home of the Sports Lounge on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Thank you.